Sabo, you are not the father. What's going on, everyone? Vampyr Gaming here with SirDundo, fresh off of his top 32 run with yellow-red Sabo. That's right. You did not mishear that. Yellow-red Sabo. I absolutely love this deck. Congrats on the top, by the way. How you feeling?
I'm feeling really good. I'm feeling really good. Thanks, man. I'm feeling tired, but I'm so happy. Like, definitely squeaked right in exactly at 32nd place. So, yeah, I just feel great.
Absolutely awesome. Well, so do you remember your matchups?
Yeah. So I started out with a win against Sakazuki, and then took an early loss against Amoria. And then we had a good streak, win against a black-yellow Luffy, win against a red-purple Law, win against a green-yellow Yamato, win against another red-purple Law, win against an Enel. And then we had our second loss against the black-yellow Luffy, but we closed out with 2 more wins against a Moria and a Sakazuki.
Amazing, amazing. Well, let's go ahead, dive into this list. Let's see the spice.
Yeah, for sure. So startup list. We got 2 of the starter deck Namis. This is the one that reallocates Rested Dawn once per turn. I think against a lot of leaders right now, this card's just like 1k counter, nothing else, because you put this against a Moria or a Sakazuki, it's like gone right away. But in some of the slower matchups, like Black Yellow Luffy, Enel, definitely not Red Purple Law, like Green Uda, if you see her, Whitebeard, stuff like that, that extra Dawn can make a huge difference because you need a Dawn under your leader to use the ability, and you need your characters to be 7k, so it just makes the math a lot easier sometimes. If you see her in the matchups where you can't play her, it's great because this deck runs a lot of bricks and you just drop her and you don't have to worry about it. But in the matchups where you have the space to play her, it can make a huge difference. And I think you saw that in like one of my losses against the Black Yellow Luffy. The math was like super tight. If I just had one more Dawn, we could have gotten there, and she wasn't on the board, and so that would have made a big difference.
Yeah.
Moving on, we got 2 of the Kumas. So Kuma KO's 2000 power less on play can also be played off trigger. That's the primary reason why I run her over the Robins. You can run the Robins. We don't run any searchers in this deck, so you don't need to stick to Revolutionary Army. But the 2000 is nice because you can also get the Gordons and Race Maxes. So if you're playing against a red purple Law who's a little greedy and like puts those out early, thinking like, oh, he's not going to remove them, you actually can, and then you can set up some nice turns going forward. Otherwise, it's just like, yeah, sometimes nice off trigger. Like Sakazuki can, do his stuff, start attacking you, play Rebecca, and then you have your Kuma off trigger, you kill the Rebecca, you don't have to do it on your turn, and it's kind of a nice way to build momentum if it happens in like a lucky way like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I was so like, I remember seeing your part of your list, and I was like, why isn't he playing Robin? Then I was like, that's right, Kuma does removal, because like I was playing Whitebeard and I was playing for Robin, and it was actually like so clutch. But yeah, the fact that you can also trigger the card makes sense, and then also the Gordon, because like Robin does not hit Gordon, and
Yeah.
you'd have to do like Ace Robin if you wanted to remove something like that, and it wouldn't be great like in Whitebeard. But yeah, so that totally makes sense with him fitting into the theme as well.
Yeah, it definitely feels really bad to like hold on to those Robins and see like them setting up all these Gordons, and you're like, damn, I can't really play a body because they're just gonna bottom deck it for not even the 1 Dawn they would have to pay otherwise. And it's like, I have removal, but it doesn't work. So this was like my solution for that. Originally was in like, I did run the Bellow Betty Searcher, and so that's why I had him. But then over iterations in practice, like I took out the Searcher and I just left him in, and I think it makes that red purple Law matchup a little nicer because you can punish people, especially if they play those Gordons early and just leave them up there waiting for you to play something.
For sure.
Next, we got a couple 2Ks. First is Koala. I think in any Revolutionary Army leader, even if you're not running the Searcher, this is just an amazing 2K. Like, no, it's minus 3,000 for 2 Dawn. It's really good. If your opponent plays 8-drop Kid, like that's really nice to see her. I'm not doing a lot of board control, so a lot of this deck is just like super aggressive rushing and putting your rushers back on your life, forcing them to attack into it, and then just taking it back into your hand and doing it one more time. So I'm not really doing a lot of board clears with her, but if you need to, you can. You could do a combo between Kuma and Koala and kill some blockers. Like if you're not seeing a way around block, like a Sanji or something, you can kill that with that combo. So the math works out pretty nice for killing a 5-cost character between the 2 of them. And then otherwise you can use it to like remove really big threats, like an 8-drop kid that's kind of completely shutting down your momentum. And yeah, really good 2K. Next 2K, we got Hiyori. So you'll kind of see later on that the theme of this deck is just triggers, like lots and lots of triggers. You want to be putting those back in your life and then playing them out ideally for free. So like the triggers that don't require you to discard a card. And Hiyori really helps with that. The one play that I think was like the best play I made with her all day yesterday was when I was playing against the green-yellow Yamato and I was down at 1 life. And I actually played her to take that 1 life and swap it with a 0-cost event, which completely like ruined his momentum when he went for game. And I was able to like heal off of the double attack. And so yeah, she's really, really good. Can really structure your turns. Like sometimes I put things in life with my leader ability, and then I'll use Hiyori to just grab them back, put something else there. There's a lot of mind games you can play with your opponent when you have Hiyori in this deck, so it's a lot of fun. Next, we got 2 Shirayas. I gotta say, this is probably like the card I'm like least sold on in the entire deck.
Really?
Yeah, like it's a really good card. It's such a good card. It doesn't always like feel like there's a great space to play it. I think against Black Yellow Luffy, it's a really, really nice card. Against Mori, it's a really nice card because you can just, they're always putting Don under their leader. Against Katakuri, if you're seeing him still, it's a really nice card. But in general, you know, there's no trigger on it, so you can't, putting it in your life doesn't really help. There's no on-play effect. And so he's just kind of a blocker, which the deck doesn't really need because you're using your leader ability to essentially make one of your characters act as a blocker. So I play a Zoro, I swing with a Zoro, I put it back in life, and now they have to swing into life. I'm at the same amount of life that I started with anyways. And so essentially that Zoro just became a blocker for me in a way. So yeah, I don't know what this card might be instead. There was a point where this was a 5-cost Momo, because I do run a good amount of the Wano cards. But it never really worked out that I would like be playing him either. At the end of the day, like this is a 1K counter, and I think that's really good in this deck. Like you just run a lot of bricks, and so every card that is not a brick is a good card to have. If someone comes to me and it's like, oh, I would replace those Shirayas like with something else, I would totally hear them out. But sometimes like just knowing like, oh, I have this blocker, if worse comes to worse, I can play it down, is good. And against Black Yellow Luffy, it's really, really nice because they're always sitting at like 7K, 9K, and it's just like a really easy way to put pressure on them. But otherwise, I'm not typically playing him, not even on curve or anything like that. I'm usually just countering out with him. And yeah, if I'm playing him, I'm probably like not in a super good spot. It means I'm probably behind and a little concerned about losing, or I just like don't have a rush card to play to like be super aggressive.
Sure, no, I get it. Yeah, I just feel like it just defines black yellow. Because if you see those, like if you establish 2 of those, you pretty much get like 311 swings. Yeah. Pretty freely, and that usually will do it because you grind them down. So I personally am a fan, but I respect it. I respect it. I feel like 2 is an okay ratio. I remember when I was watching you play Black Yellow Luffy, I was like, please tell me this man is playing Shiraya. I was like, because you just, you know, it makes it very winnable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the beauty of this list. Like, the core of the deck is really around some of the rush characters, and so a lot of the auxiliary pieces you can cater to whatever you're seeing a lot in your locals. So I think, for example, like I wouldn't even recommend running this list if everyone at your locals plays Mori and Nell. Like if that's all you're seeing, you're gonna have a tough time. But if you're seeing a lot of Black Yellow Luffy, like yeah, maybe bump this up to 4. Like that makes a lot of sense because it's not a core piece of the deck, but like as you get into later Dawn turns and you have Dawn to spare to do other things, like that's what you're gonna want to put down.
Sure, makes sense.
So next we're going to get into some of the rushers. We got 4 of the Zoro. He's really, really good in this deck. I think the reason he's at 4 and some of the other rushers aren't, even though he's probably like the worst of the 3, is just to make the math work the most. So to get your leader ability off Sabo, you need 1 Dawn under Sabo, and you need a character that costs 7,000. And so sometimes like you don't have enough Dawn to like play a second character and like give them a boost, because you had to put like 1 Dawn under your character, you had to put 1 Dawn under Sabo, you only have 3 Dawn left. And so Zoro like fits that slot super nicely. Like I can, like say I got a Kiku off life, I can put a Dawn under Kiku, put a Dawn on my leader, do a 6K, a 7K, and then put Kiku in life and make a Zoro a 7K as well. Whereas some of the other rushers are just too expensive for that. So it's really nice to have that flexibility to play him early and get like added value out of your leader effect. Like you could buff him up to 7K with essentially 5 Dawn. So if you have 6 Dawn to spare, you can use your leader ability with nothing on the board, which I think is really important. It's like the cheapest way to do that, unless your opponent's at 2 or less life, where our Kid and Killers come in. So if you're at 2 or less life, Kid and Killer is just way better because he's a 7k on attack for 4 Dawn. So the math is just 1 Dawn better. But otherwise, like, your Zoros are just like a really cornerstone piece. A lot of the time later in the game, when they're like at lower life, I'm playing these Kids and Killers like every turn. I'm playing them, I'm buffing up something else, I'm putting them back in life. They're forced to attack me. I take it back to my hand. Sometimes the players will think, oh, you know what? I'm just not going to attack. I'm not going to give him the Kid and Killer back. So I have another one in my hand anyways. I'm fine with that. Like, now I'm just sitting at 4 life for 1 turn longer, and I'm just like throwing pressure down on these opponents and hitting them with like 7k, 9k, 8k, 2-3 times a turn, forcing them to kind of try to be in a defensive position as much as possible.
Yeah, of course. And for those who don't know, so Sabo's ability for 1 Dawn, you can add a 7,000 power. Does it have to be a 3 cost or more? I think it does it have a cost requirement? Or just 4?
Yeah, 3 cost or more, so you can't do it on like the Kumas or Koalas or anything.
Yeah. But so then you get to add it back, and then you buff a character by 2,000 until your next turn. So like if you swing with the Zoro, after he's been buffed, he's 7, but your opponent wants to swing into it. They're swinging at 7 instead of 5, which makes Zoro way stronger than he inherently is, because usually they'll just like swing 5 to pick cards or to clear. And so if they're not playing hard removal, it's a very sticky body.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's like a really good way. Like, I think a lot of you'll kind of see throughout the deck list, like, this isn't your standard, 2, 4, 6, 8 curve. There isn't really a top end. A lot of the decisions that you make as Sabo with this deck is more about which character do I leave on board? Do I even bother playing a second character, or do I just swing really big with my leader and my rush character and then just put the rush character back in life? Do I care about buffing anything? Am I gonna activate this trigger? Am I gonna counter out now or counter out later? Like, those are a lot of the bigger decision points that matter for this leader, and less more about like hitting a specific curve. It's more about like figuring out how much pressure to put down at each point, so that you don't get steamrolled in the later turns, because pretty much every other deck beats you in the late game. You don't really have a late game plan. You really just want your opponent to be in a position where they can't afford not to be defensive, and then once they get defensive, there's not enough pressure to end the game before you just completely wipe the board with them.
Makes sense.
Next, we got some more of the other cards to kind of just like round out some of the abilities of the deck. We got 4 Karasus. Really, really, really good card. Not a brick, which is important because these 7 are. So we're starting to, I think we have 15 bricks total, so these are 7. But Karasu is a 1k counter. He can play him on your 4 Dawn turn. Like, we run a lot of rush characters, but at the end of the day, sometimes you just don't see them. And so in your early game, playing Karasu for 4 and then swinging into your opponent for 6 is really, really nice. And then they're going to focus a lot of resources to get rid of this because the ability is so powerful and so intimidating. And then you don't really care about it because it's not a cornerstone of your deck. It's kind of a nice to have, and it adds pressure when it is on the board. But if they're going to like dedicate their turn and their time to removing this, that's kind of like a net benefit for you. Because putting it back in your life isn't super great, because then you have to play it again for 4 Dawn. You don't get a trigger off of it. And if they do ignore it, they just get punished for it. So it's a really nice card. Only Sabo and Ace and Bella Betty can benefit from the ability. And I think it's good that the deck can make use of it, because it makes a huge difference, especially against leaders like Black Yellow Luffy, against anyone that runs 8-cost Kid, and things where like they have those like super high cost power thresholds you really have to get over.
That makes sense. No, yeah, I'm a fan.
And now we're going to start getting into a lot more of our triggers. Triggers are huge here. Like, I think this is a deck that really requires you to be a little lucky, because if you don't hit those triggers, some matchups, like, you can get by without them, which almost half my matches I didn't see any triggers, but the triggers are what give you the win, and I definitely had a couple of wins just from lucky triggers. So the first one is Limburg. He is, I think, really nice in this kind of blocker-heavy meta. He can kill anything that is 3,000 power or less. If he is 7,000 power or more, you have to trash a card for his trigger, so you gotta really be careful of like when you actually activate that. Like, you almost always want the body, but especially against like Sakazuki and Reputable Law, you don't want to, if they attack too early, you don't want to activate the trigger when they have so much Dawn up, because then they can still remove the character, and then now you're out 2 cards, which feels really bad. So that's kind of where knowing how much to counter and when to counter comes into play, because you got to really plan for that bottom deck or that removal or whatever comes down the road. But yeah, that's a really cool card. It can get rid of Rebecca. You can get rid of like some of the annoying stuff like Sindri or Brand New that they might just, or Helmeppo that they might just put a little Don under just to poke at you. And if you're pairing it with Koala, now you can get rid of a 6K or less. So I'm not doing that too often, but if the opportunity presents itself and I can remove an attacker for the cost of essentially like 2 Don, that's a pretty good thing. It can slow my opponent's momentum and just give me the time I need to take the game. Next is Cracker. I mean, this is, I think, probably the second card I would say I'm like least sold on in the entire deck. If you were to replace this card, I would say replace it with something that has a trigger and something that has counter. Otherwise, leave this in here. I think the trigger count is really important in this deck. You only have 4 life, so you want to maximize your chances of at least getting 1 or 2 bodies off that. But the counter is also very important because you can't afford more bricks. There was a couple of games where my hand was just like 3 rush cards and a 1K and a 2K, and that's just like a really, really rough hand against leaders that play 1, 2, 3 characters every single turn, and then can swing 5K at you like 4 times. It's not what you want to see. So it's important to have for the ratios, but like not the best card. I think the matchup where this matters most is in Moria, because Moria is a 5 life leader, and so getting him down to 3 life is really important for some of our other triggers like Neko and Kiku. So these guys only activate off life if your opponent has 3 or less life, which if you're going first against Red Purple Law, Sakazuki, Enel, they're Black Yellow Luffy, they're at 3 life the second you swing. Like they'll take that first life almost always. You make sure they take it. Like I swing 8K all the time. And then if your first life is one of these guys, you're set. Against Moria, if your first life is this guy, you're set, because you can put a lot of Don into that and get them down to 3 life really quickly. Otherwise, like it just feels really bad because you might see these guys and then you can't trigger them, and it's like it really ruins the momentum, because otherwise that would have been a huge play for you, which is kind of why Moria becomes one of the toughest matchups. Instead of the Cracker, I did play around with the Sanji for a little bit, and there's a lot of really cool interactions you can do with that. So you can have Kid and Killer out, swing 7K, put the Kid and Killer in life after playing a Sanji, and then buff the Sanji 7K. So now your Sanji is a 7K blocker for your turn, which is really cool.
That's actually insane.
Yeah, it's a sick combo. It's a sick combo. So if you're feeling like you need something a little bit more defensive out of the deck, I think that's a really good swap. Otherwise, I think Cracker's nice. It's just like a threat. It's good against the leaders that just hoard life a little more. It can kind of even the playing field. But Sanji's like really good in this slot as well. And we're almost done here. We got 4 Satoris. I think this one, like, super obvious. Like, you got your 2K counter, you got your trigger, like, pretty much that. I almost never... I think I might have triggered him once or twice. There was a time where I actually chose not to trigger him, and it was a big misplay, because when I thought about it a little bit after, I could have easily triggered him and then put him back in life in the subsequent turn. But I was like, oh, I have no counter in hand. Like, I really can't afford to trigger him. I need the 2K. But I should have absolutely triggered him and then just put him back in my life and then just taken the counter next time. But he's really nice. Just, I think with him, we have 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, and I guess technically 22, but 20 real triggers that can kind of change the momentum of the game if you see them at the right time. And the actual MVP of the entire day, Rush Luffy, best card in red. I think I won with a Rush Luffy swing like 7 out of 9 games. I gotta double check the VOD, but like I might have even won every single game with a Rush Luffy swing. I saw him every game. I sometimes saw 2 of him, and he is so good. Even when people are prepared for him, you still win with him, because you're just like pressuring them with 7Ks, 8Ks, 9Ks every single turn. Sometimes they go down to 0 life super early just because they don't want to drop 3 cards, and then you Rush Luffy for a game. And if it doesn't work that turn, you just put him back in life and you do it again the next turn. Such a good card. I think the reason that Kid and Killer, Rush Luffy are at 3 but Zoro's at 4 is because he's just the most flexible. You really want to be able to use your leader ability. It feels really bad to like not have the Dawn to essentially like swing and put them back in life, because putting them in life is a big part of just surviving long enough to get the game. And so the 3 Dawn is like a really nice, and I never felt like, man, I really wish I had Rush Luffy in hand, and like didn't have him. There was one game out of the 10 where I top decked him on the exact turn I needed him, every other game, like I always saw him early, and I had like time to figure out when I wanted to use him. So 3 feels like a good number for me. If someone wants 4, that's fair. He's like the best card in the deck. And then to round it off, 2 of the 0-cost event. I did use it once with Hiyori to heal myself. Otherwise, it's just like you got 3, 6, 10, 14 cards with no counter. So 0-cost kind of helps you deal with that a little bit better. And that's the whole deck.
Absolutely, yeah. So the one thing that I loved about your list is that you weren't playing any of the kids. And the biggest thing was, so like I had messed around with blue, yellow ace without playing any of those combos. Now with that in mind, I do know like I think it's 8 Dawn Curve is just monstrous, because on 6 you go play ace, swing ace, and then you attach 1 to your leader and you add it back, and then just go 6 at face, and then next turn you can go play ace, go 7, and then you attach 1 to your leader, then you put it back, and then you play the baby ace, and then you do that, play ace out of your life, your leader becomes a 7k, then you go 7 with ace again, and then go 8. With that wombo combo in mind, what just made you decide to not play the kids?
Yeah, for sure. I think I looked at it and I was like, you know, Black Yellow Luffy just does this so much better. Like, I think he's able to get those pieces out of his trash. He's able to play Moria to get the baby ace and baby Luffy back if he doesn't have them. So he's like, you know, he can just use them as counter early, get them back with Moria, and is so much more flexible with it, to the point that he can kind of guarantee a version of that combo every turn in the late game, like starting at like 6 Dawn. And when I looked at like Red Yellow Sabo, like you would have to run, you know, 4 of the babies for both Ace and for Luffy. You'd have to probably run the Garp Searcher to add some consistency. And I was like, that's just like a lot of pieces that don't do anything unless you have the combo set up. So it felt kind of bad, and I think it kind of lowered the momentum of the deck. So I tried to think of like, what is the deck really, really good at? And I think it's just really good at being aggressive and annoying. The triggers are frustrating, like triggering a Kiku, and then next turn I just put the Kiku right back on top of life, and now you got to stare at it and think about, do you want to give it back to me? Think about how you're going to swing. Sometimes they'll like swing super low, so that I'm tempted to just take the Kiku and then try to like bait me into playing it early so that they can remove it or bottom deck it. And I'm like, nope, I'll just counter out 1 case if you're going to do that, and I'll just not play the Kiku until next turn. So yeah, I think to sum it up, like Black Yellow Luffy just does that so much better, and so this deck excels at aggression and maximizing the value of triggers, getting like double value out of your rush cards, and putting in those little brothers and all the consistency pieces around that. Just felt like adding in a bunch of extra stuff in the deck that doesn't help like every turn. It only helps your most optimal turn, which you're not always going to see your most optimal turn.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. Well, thank you so much. Let the people know where they can find you.
Yeah, for sure. I'm SirDundo on YouTube and Twitch. You know, I don't post as often and as consistently and as great as Vampyr, but I do like to talk about like my list and my matchups and try different things. So if you guys are interested in decks that are different and maybe not of the meta, you can come check me out.
Definitely, yeah, and I'll include the links in the video description, so definitely go check those out. He also has a video of the deck list himself. I'm sure he goes more in depth there, and then you can also watch, because he live streamed his matchups, so you can go over there as well and check up the matchups to kind of learn this yourself. Well, congrats again, and thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, and then here we just have the list nice and laid out for y'all. Just my overall thoughts. I think, obviously, you know, he did very well. He did mention, like, Enel and Moria are kind of not great. The biggest thing that I saw also from his gameplay were, like, cards that can restack into the life. And so like Dinjiro, my first thought to mind is, can I play this? Because it can't be KO'd, so it's automatically better versus Sokka if you attach 2, and there are not Sokka against Moria, and they're at 2, and you drop this guy right here. So he's definitely just one of the first cards that comes to my mind. I think him, and there's another one that lets you play it. This guy, no? But yeah, so here is the list all laid out. Overall, I get it. You know, he did very well. I did mention he got kind of lucky, so his Enel isn't great. Same with Moria, and that makes sense. Moria can just bring out a ton of big bodies, and they are a 5 life leader, which does matter, and they have a decent amount of 2Ks, and this deck kind of just like rushes and applies a crazy amount of pressure. My first thoughts on here overall is, you know, and he kind of touched on it too. If you have Shiraya, you could try to up that just a little bit. If you have a bunch of black yellow Luffys. Also, my thoughts are maybe there's room for Dinjiro because it does require a 7, and this card can also not be KO'd by effects if you attach 2 Dons, so it can help with the Moria and just applying more pressure on them there. And then you of course also have Dogstorm. He doesn't have as great of a effect as Cat Viper because the attacking actives does matter, but he is another 5,000 power that you can play for free without triggering. But huge shout out to SirDundo. Appreciate having him on the channel. Go check out his links, and as always, if you found this content of value, if you do me a favor, hit that subscribe button.